Hey guys, tonight we burrow deep into the coziest, chilliest experience, settling in for a long winter's night. You probably won't survive until spring without a good sleep strategy, or at least a very fluffy blanket. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment your location and time below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The light outside has surrendered, hasn't it? That bruised purple and apathetic gray sky has finally given up the ghost, leaving only the inky blackness of a deep winter evening pressing against the windows. You can almost feel the temperature drop another degree just by looking out there. Can't you? The day, with its frantic energy and endless demands, is finally, mercifully, winding down. You're on your way, moving from whatever occupied your last few hours, perhaps the clatter of a keyboard in a fluorescent-lit office, the hiss of a coffee machine you've cleaned for the 10th time, or maybe just the quiet hum of your own thoughts as you finish that last chapter, or doom-scrolled just a little too long on your phone. Your journey to your sleeping space begins. It might be a short one, just a few steps from the living room couch, now littered with the evidence of a day spent. A stray mug, a crumpled throw, or perhaps it's longer, the shiver-inducing dash from a car parked just a little too far down the frosted street. The crunch of icy slush underfoot, if you're unlucky enough to encounter it. You pull your coat tighter, the collar scratching slightly against your neck, a familiar discomfort. The air bites at any exposed skin. Your nose tingles, and your ears, even under a hat, feel like they're about to file a formal complaint with the management. That's you. By the way, it's that special kind of cold that seems to seep right into your bones. The kind that makes you question why humans ever decided to settle in places that actively try to freeze them solid for several months a year. Honestly, sometimes I think our ancestors just had a really robust sense of humor. Or maybe they just really liked complaining about the weather. It's a tradition we uphold with great dedication. As you step inside, or simply transition from your day zone to your night zone within your home, the first wave hits you relief. A sigh escapes your lips, maybe a little puff of steam if you've just come in from the genuine outdoors. The immediate assault of the cold recedes, replaced by the slightly less cold of indoors. It's not a tropical paradise in here. Not yet. Unless you're one of those people who keeps their thermostat cranked to about summer in the Sahara. But it's better. The aggressive chill is gone, but a lingering dampness, a persistent coolness, still clings to your clothes, your hair, your very being. This is where the discomfort starts to mingle with that initial relief. Like an uninvited guest at a very small party who insists on talking about their cryptocurrency investments. Your fingers are stiff, aren't they? You flex them, trying to coax some life back into them. They feel like little wooden pegs, clumsy and unresponsive. Your toes, encased in socks and shoes, are probably staging their own silent, chilly protest. You can almost hear them muttering about frostbite and demanding immediate relocation to a warmer climate. Perhaps somewhere with a beach and a tiny umbrella drink. They've seen the holiday brochures. They know what's possible. The house, or your apartment, has its own winter personality. It creaks and groans differently in the cold, settling around you like an old, slightly arthritic friend. Sounds are sharper, more distinct in the dense air. The hum of the refrigerator seems louder in the quiet. The sigh of the heating system as it kicks in, or, more likely, as it valiantly struggles to keep up against the onslaught of winter, is a soundtrack to these early winter nights. You might catch a whiff of something cooking from a neighbor, a Richmond stew or baking bread, or the faint, almost metallic scent of snow in the air, even through closed windows. It's a reminder that others are also hunkering down, sharing this collective experience of seeking warmth and shelter. Remember how people in the Middle Ages would huddle around a central hearth that was their main source of heat, light, and often their kitchen too. The Bayeux Tapestry, which famously depicts the Norman conquest of 1066, shows various scenes of daily life. And while it's more about battles and kings, it gives us glimpses into a world where warmth was a precious hard-won commodity, often centered around such open fires. Imagine the smoky, communal, and probably quite fragrant experience of an early medieval winter evening. No central heating, just the crackle of wood, the shared body heat of everyone crammed into one relatively small room, and probably a lot of storytelling. Suddenly, your slightly underperforming radiator, or the draft from that one window, doesn't seem quite so catastrophic, does it? There's a peculiar weariness that settles in at the end of a cold day. It's not just physical tiredness from whatever you were doing, it's a deeper, almost cellular exhaustion. Your body has been fighting the cold, even if you weren't consciously aware of it, tensing muscles, constricting blood vessels, working overtime just to maintain its core temperature. Now, as you begin the slow march towards bed, that tension starts to unwind, sometimes painfully, leaving behind a dull ache in your shoulders, a stiffness in your neck, a general feeling that you've been subtly wrestling a polar bear all day. You shed the outer layers, the heavy coat that feels like it weighs a ton, the damp scarf, the hat that's left an imprint on your forehead like a temporary, confused frown. Each removed item feels like a small victory, a step closer to comfort, a shedding of the day's armor. But the chill has permeated deeper. Your jeans feel cold and stiff against your skin. Your sweater still holds the memory of the outside air, releasing a faint, cool sigh as you pull it off. It's a bit like peeling an onion. This process of dewintering yourself, layer by layer, hoping to find a warm, comfortable core somewhere inside. And let's be honest, there's a certain grim satisfaction to it all. Isn't there surviving another sub-zero commute? Or just making it through the day when the sun barely bothered to show its face above the horizon? It's a low-key modern heroism. You won't get a medal for it, but you can definitely award yourself an extra biscuit with your evening tea. Or perhaps that slightly more expensive hot chocolate mix you've been saving. Though, speaking of ancient survival, and how people adapted, historians still argue whether the invention of trousers, initially by nomadic horse-riding cultures like the Scythians in Central Asia, was primarily for warmth in harsh climates or for protection and ease of riding. Perhaps it was a delightful two-for-one deal, much like finding an extra, unexpected fry at the bottom of the takeout bag, a small delightful bonus. The discomfort isn't just physical. There's a mental residue, too, from the day just passed. The lingering thoughts, the unanswered emails, the to-do list for tomorrow, already starting to whisper its insidious suggestions. The darkness outside, while familiar in winter, can feel oppressive if you let it. A vast, indifferent void. Your mind, like your body, needs to shed its own layers of stress and activity. This journey to your sleeping space isn't just about moving your physical form from point A to point B. It's about guiding your mind towards rest, coaxing it away from the bright glare of daytime alertness and into the softer, more diffused focus of impending sleep. You might glance at your phone, its screen glowing with a cool, blue light, a stark contrast to the dimming ambiance of the room you're aiming for. A quick check, a final scroll, perhaps one last meme to send you off with a chuckle. It's a modern ritual, isn't it? Almost a way of tucking the wider world away before you tuck yourself in. Though, here's a quirky little tidbit in the 18th century, and even into the 19th, Some wealthier Europeans had bed warmers. These weren't electric blankets, of course, but rather long-handled pans made of copper or brass, which would be filled with hot coals from the fire and then passed between the sheets to take the chill off. Imagine trying to scroll through your social media feed while wielding one of those fiery implements. You'd probably have fewer accidental likes, but a much higher risk of setting your canopy bed on fire. A different kind of hot take, if you will. So here you are, poised on the threshold. The day is definitively done. The cold, though still a palpable presence beyond your walls, is being held at bay. Relief is winning. Slowly but surely, over that initial, lingering discomfort, the promise of warmth, of softness, of the sweet oblivion of sleep, beckons invitingly from your bed. The journey isn't quite over, but you're almost there, standing in the quiet anticipation of surrender to the night. Your muscles are still a little tense, your mind still gently buzzing with the remnants of the day, but the dominant feeling is one of transition, of letting go, of heading, finally, to your winter bed. The outside world, with its biting winds and frozen landscapes, can wait until morning. For now, your focus narrows to this small, personal space, this sanctuary you are about to create for yourself against the lingering chill of the long, dark winter day. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open a heavy, ill-fitting wooden door, more of a collection of planks held together with some rather optimistic iron bits and perhaps a bit of rope, and you step inside, leaving that biting wind, the one that gnaws right through your layers, behind for a moment. Welcome to your medieval winter home. First impressions. It's compact. And by compact, I mean the kind of space that makes a modern tiny home look like a sprawling mansion. You're likely standing in a single, rectangular room. This isn't just your living area, it's also your dining room, your kitchen, your bedroom, and, as we'll soon discover, a rather popular spot for your livestock. Think of it as an all-inclusive, if somewhat rustic, studio apartment. Occasionally, a slightly more prosperous peasant might boast a second room, perhaps a small partitioned off area or a lean-to built against one wall. But for many, this one space is the entirety of their world during the long winter months. It's the central hub for every conceivable activity, both human and, shall we say, agricultural. The walls around you are a testament to resourcefulness, constructed in a style known as wattle-and-daub. Picture this: a sturdy timber frame. The skeleton of the house is erected first, then thinner, pliable branches, like hazel or willow, are woven horizontally between the upright posts. This creates a sort of lattice, the wattle, almost like the sides of a giant, very rustic basket. Once this framework is complete, it's time for the daub. This is a wonderfully sticky, almost primordial goo, typically a mixture of wet soil, clay, sand, chopped straw for binding, and, yes, animal dung. This concoction, with its unique earthy bouquet, is then plastered onto and into the wattle, pushed into all the gaps, and smoothed down as much as possible by hand or with simple tools. It's like ancient adobe, really, or a very, very early form of eco-friendly building material, though perhaps not one you'd see featured on grand designs. You reach out and touch the wall. It's uneven, a bit lumpy under your fingertips, and undeniably cold. You can almost feel the faint ridges of the wattle branches beneath the dried daub. Look closely, and you'll spot tiny hairline cracks, maybe even some larger gaps where the daub has shrunk away from the timber frame as it dried. These aren't sealed with weatherproof silicone. Oh no. If a gap is particularly bothersome, you might try to stuff it with extra straw, dried moss, old rags, or whatever scraps you can find. It's a constant battle against the drafts that whisper and sometimes shriek through these imperfections. Imagine living with a window stuck permanently ajar, just a crack, but enough to remind you constantly of the freezing world outside. Gaze upwards. The roof above you is most likely thatched. Thick bundles of reeds or straw are layered meticulously, overlapping like shingles, designed to shed rainwater and snow. In winter, this thatch is probably heavy with moisture, possibly even sporting a delicate layer of frost on the inside on particularly cold mornings. It's also, almost certainly, home to a bustling community of small creatures: mice, rats, spiders, and various insects, all seeking their own cozy refuge from the elements. Every now and then, you might hear a faint rustle, a tiny squeak, or the skittering of little feet from directly above your head. Don't mind them. They're just your uninvited, non-rent-paying upstairs neighbors. A mainstream historical fact: for you, many peasant homes, especially in England, were built using a cruck frame. This involved using pairs of large, naturally curved timbers, joined at the apex to form an A shape, which supported the roof. These crucks often extended right down to the ground, or rested on simple stone pads, making the structure feel very much a part of the earth it stood on. Now, let's consider what's underfoot. You're not standing on polished hardwood or even flagstones. The floor is most likely compacted earth, just dirt. Over years of use, it becomes trodden down, hard-packed, almost like a well-worn path, but it's still earth, and in winter, it's cold and persistently damp, drawing moisture up from the frozen or sodden ground beneath. To combat this, and to add a tiny measure of comfort, people would often scatter fresh rushes, straw, or bracken on the floor. This layer helped to absorb some of the dampness, mud tracked in from outside, and other assorted spills and debris. Think of it as a medieval disposable carpet when it became too soiled and smelly, which it inevitably did. You'd sweep the whole lot out and lay down a fresh layer, a quirky little tidbit for you, some household accounts, and even literary sources from the period mention that sweet-smelling herbs like meadowsweet, lavender, or chamomile were sometimes mixed in with these floor coverings. It was a valiant, if somewhat optimistic, attempt to freshen the air, a sort of medieval potpourri, trying its best against formidable odds. Speaking of formidable, let's address the other occupants of your cozy abode. You're not alone in here, and I don't just mean your family. In the harshness of winter, it was common, almost essential, for peasants to bring their valuable livestock inside the house with them. We're talking about your cow, perhaps a couple of sheep, maybe a pig, and certainly your chickens. These animals were not mere pets. They were your most critical assets, your source of food, milk, wool, and the horsepower needed for plowing your fields. Come spring, leaving them outside to face the brutal winter weather could mean losing them to the cold, to starvation, or to opportunistic predators like wolves. So, in they come, often one end of your single-room dwelling, sometimes slightly lower lying, and perhaps with a rudimentary drainage channel dug into the earth floor, served as the animal byre. A low wattle hurdle, or sometimes nothing more than a symbolic line in the dirt, might separate your sleeping and living area from theirs. So, as you huddle near the fire, trying to absorb every last calorie of warmth, you're accompanied by a symphony of animal sounds: the soft chewing of cud, the occasional snort or grunt, a gentle moo, a sleepy baa, the rustle of straw as they shift their weight. It's like having a live 24/7 farm soundscape, whether you wanted one or not. There's also undeniably a certain fragrance, a rich, earthy, deeply animalistic aroma that permeates everything. On the upside, all those large animal bodies generate a considerable amount of heat. It's like having several furry, four-legged, hay-munching radiators. Very eco-friendly, in its way. Historians still argue whether the precise layout and integration of animal quarters within human dwellings was a universal practice driven purely by necessity, or if there were regional variations and social nuances influencing how closely people and their livestock cohabited. Now, let's turn our attention to the focal point of your winter dwelling, the central hearth. You won't find an elegant stone fireplace with a grand chimney breast here. Instead, you have an open fire, often situated directly on the earth floor in the middle of the room, or perhaps on a slightly raised clay or stone platform. This fire is your lifeline. It's your sole source of heat against the bitter cold, your primary source of light once the meager daylight filtering through tiny openings fades, and your cooking station. All your meals, which are likely simple, one-pot affairs like pottage, a thick, endlessly simmering stew of grains, vegetables, and occasionally a scrap of meat, are prepared over these dancing flames. But with an open fire and no chimney, where does all the smoke go? Well, the simple answer is mostly, it just hangs around. There might be a small hole in the thatched roof, optimistically called a smoke hole. Or perhaps you just leave the door ajar a crack when the fire is particularly vigorous. Neither is a terribly efficient ventilation system. Consequently, the upper part of your home is perpetually filled with a thick, acrid gray-brown haze of wood smoke. Over the years, this smoke coats the roof timbers and the underside of the thatch with a greasy black layer of soot. Your eyes sting. It's a constant, low-level irritation. A scratchiness in your throat that you simply learn to live with. Imagine the air quality in a very, very smoky pub before smoking bans, and then multiply that by a factor of 10, and then add the scent of damp wool and cow. Long-term exposure to this concentrated particulate matter would have had significant health consequences, with respiratory ailments like bronchitis and emphysema being tragically common. It's the original passive smoking on an industrial scale. The overall air quality, to put it mildly, is challenging. You've got the pungent smoke from the burning wood or peat, the moisture from human and animal respiration, the damp, earthy smell from the floor, the aroma of constantly cooking food, the faint but persistent smell of unwashed bodies, because regular hot baths are a distant dream, especially in winter, and, of course, the ever-present, all-encompassing bouquet of your livestock companions. It's an olfactory tapestry, woven from the very fabric of medieval peasant life. A very robust and characterful tapestry, you might say. You might even joke that it's an acquired taste, or rather, an acquired smell, that most modern noses would politely decline to acquire. Ventilation, as you've probably surmised, is almost non-existent. Any openings that might pass for windows are small, typically just unglazed holes in the wall. These might be covered with wooden shutters, which you'd close tightly against the cold and wind, or perhaps with pieces of stretched animal bladder or heavily oiled linen, which would allow a sliver of murky, diffuse light to penetrate, but very little fresh air. So, the air inside just gets staler, and staler, and staler. It's a constant, unenviable trade-off, a bit more warmth preserved versus slightly more breathable air. And in the depths of a medieval winter, warmth, however smoky and smelly, almost always wins. So, here you are, enveloped in the dim, smoky, animal-scented, earthy reality of your winter home. It's a far cry from a thermostat-controlled, double-glazed, air-filtered existence, isn't it? But for now, this wattle-and-daub, thatch-roofed shelter is your bulwark against the elements. It's where you survive. It's home. You draw your rough woolen cloak a little tighter, inching closer to the flickering, smoky fire, listening to the wind howl its mournful song outside and the gentle, rhythmic chewing of the cow just a few feet away. It's a unique kind of cozy, a very, very medieval kind of cozy. And now, as your eyes adjust a little more to the dim, flickering light that we imagined earlier, your gaze falls upon tonight's grand sleeping accommodation. The straw mattress beckons. Well, perhaps beckons is too enthusiastic a word. It exists. It's there, occupying a space on the floor, waiting with a kind of stoic resignation. You approach it slowly, your feet still feeling the cool, uneven surface of the floorboards we talked about. This isn't a bed in the way you'd picture one from a glossy magazine, or even a budget furniture store. Forget your memory foam, your hybrid coils, your organic latex support layers. What you see before you is essentially a large, somewhat lumpy sack. It's likely made of coarse linen or hemp, a rough utilitarian fabric, and it's visibly stuffed with, well, straw. You can almost smell it from here. A dry, slightly sweet, earthy scent, like a newly mown field left to bake in the sun, but with an underlying hint of dust, and perhaps just a touch of mildew if this particular batch hasn't been changed in a while. Which, let's be honest, is a distinct possibility. Changing the straw was a chore, and not always top of the priority list when survival itself was the main game. So, this particular mattress might be less freshly harvested and more gently composted. You reach out a hand, tentatively, and press down. It rustles loudly, a dry, papery sound that seems to echo in the quiet space. It's not soft. It's yielding, in a grudging sort of way. Lumps and bumps are immediately apparent. You can feel individual stalks, some perhaps a little too pokey for comfort, already imagining them making their presence known through the fabric later tonight. It's a far cry from the smooth, even surfaces we take for granted. This is a landscape you'll be navigating in your sleep, a terrain of miniature hills and valleys. The whole thing lies directly on the wooden floor, or perhaps, if you're a little less fortunate, on an earthen floor, meaning the chill we discussed earlier has a direct line of attack from beneath. There's no fancy bed frame here, no box spring to elevate you from the drafts, and well, we'll get to the floor-level inhabitants shortly. For now, just appreciate this marvel of pre-modern engineering. It's less a supportive sleeping surface and more a dedicated patch of slightly less hard floor. Comfort, you're beginning to realize, is a very relative term here. Now, let's consider the bedding. Draped, or perhaps more accurately, tossed over this straw pallet, you find what passes for your covers. You're likely looking at one, maybe two, wool blankets. And when we say wool, try to banish any thoughts of soft merino or fluffy cashmere. This is utilitarian wool, my friend. Think of the coarsest, itchiest sweater your great aunt ever knitted you. The one that felt like wearing a friendly Brillo pad. And then imagine that as your primary source of warmth for the night. You run your hand over it. The texture is rough, undeniably scratchy against your skin. The fibers are thick, probably hand-spun and woven, full of natural lanolin, which gives it a slightly greasy feel and a distinct, musky, sheep-like aroma. This smell mingles with the scent of wood smoke from the hearth, and perhaps a faint, lingering aroma of previous occupants. Personal laundry, especially for bulky items like blankets, wasn't exactly a daily size, or even weekly Briga's fare. It was a significant undertaking, so these blankets have likely seen many nights, many bodies, and absorbed a rich tapestry of human existence. They might be surprisingly heavy, these wool blankets, but not necessarily warm in the way a modern down duvet is. Their effectiveness often depended on their thickness and how tightly woven they were. If they're old and worn, they might be quite thin in places, offering more of a psychological barrier against the cold than a physical one. You might notice some mends, some patches, testament to their value. A good wool blanket was a prized possession. In fact, a mainstream historical fact for you, wool was a cornerstone of many pre-industrial economies, and good quality woolen textiles were valuable commodities, often listed in wills and inventories. So, even if it feels like you're about to be exfoliated by your bedding, know that it was likely cherished. The colors, if they ever had any, are probably faded to a dull, indeterminate shade of brown or gray. Bright dyes were expensive and often not very color fast. So, you're looking at a palette of earthy tones, blending seamlessly with the straw and the dim light. It's all very rustic. You might find yourself wishing for that extra layer you were wearing earlier. And now, we come to the less charming aspect of your sleeping arrangements, the potential for uninvited guests. As you contemplate lying down on this rustling, scratchy bed, you become acutely aware that you probably won't be entirely alone. Let's start with the smallest, shall we, fleas? Oh yes, these tiny acrobatic irritants were virtually ubiquitous. The straw in the mattress, a 5-star resort for fleas. The woolen blankets, a delightful vacation home. You won't see them, not easily, but you'll feel them. That sudden, sharp itch, then another, and another. It's a gentle, persistent reminder that you're part of a thriving ecosystem. It's said that some people kept small, furry dogs, not just for companionship or hunting, but as flea catchers, the idea being the fleas would prefer the dog. One can only hope there's a very friendly spaniel nearby. Then there are the slightly larger, more audacious visitors' mice. You might hear them first, a faint rustling in the walls, a tiny skittering sound across the floorboards. Remember how your mattress is on the floor. Prime real estate for a curious mouse. They might be interested in the straw, perhaps nibbling at any stray grains, or even bits of dropped food if the previous occupant was a messy eater. The thought of a tiny whiskered nose exploring your earlobe as you sleep is, well, it's an authentic historical experience, let's call it that. Our ancestors, it seems, had a much higher tolerance for cohabitation with rodents, a sort of live and let scurry philosophy. Perhaps this is where the phrase quiet as a mouse kind of came from, because if they weren't quiet, you definitely know they were there. And finally, the most personal of pests, lice. Head lice, body lice. They were simply a fact of life for many. Close living quarters, infrequent bathing by modern standards, and the sharing of bedding all contributed to their spread. You might find yourself instinctively scratching your head just thinking about it. Historians still argue whether the constant presence of such pests was a source of significant daily distress, leading to elaborate, if often ineffective, delousing rituals, or if it was simply an accepted, albeit itchy, part of the human condition for most people. There's a quirky, lesser-known tidbit. People would sometimes use fine-toothed combs made of wood or bone, not just for styling, but specifically for combing out lice and their eggs. These combs have been found in archaeological digs dating back centuries, a testament to humanity's long and intimate battle with these tiny freeloaders. So, as you prepare to settle down, just remember your bedmates tonight are less snuggle buddy and more entomological study group. Sweet dreams, or, dreams of some kind. All right? You've found your spot for the night, nestled in as best you can against the cool earth, or perhaps on that slightly less than luxurious bed of leaves we talked about earlier. And now the crucial question arises. As the last light fades and the air begins to bite just a little sharper, what exactly do you sleep in? You might, of course, choose to sleep in absolutely nothing at all. Au naturel, the way nature perhaps intended. or at least the way many people throughout history have found most practical. There's a certain freedom to it, isn't there? No twisted seams, no bunched up fabric constricting you as you try to find that perfect, comfortable position. Your skin breathes, unimpeded, against the air or the rough comfort of your bedding. It's also, let's be honest, one less thing to wash, which, depending on your current laundry facilities, or total lack thereof, might be a significant bonus. Sleeping without clothes can also help your body regulate its temperature more effectively. You radiate heat more easily, which can be a blessing on a stuffy night. Or if you're one of those people who, like a human furnace, could probably power a small village with your overnight heat output. But then, there's the other side of the coin. Even a thin layer of something can offer a surprising amount of comfort. Think of a simple linen shift, or perhaps just the undertunic you wore during the day. If it's reasonably clean and dry, it's not about high fashion here. It's about a barrier against a stray biting insect that somehow found its way into your carefully constructed shelter. A barrier against the scratchiness of that wool blanket or the pokey bits of straw in your makeshift mattress. Remember that slightly dubious patch of ground you had to clear? Yeah, a little something between you and that might make for a more peaceful slumber. This brings us to that delicate dance between practicality and modesty, even when you're alone, or think you are, because let's face it, even the squirrels might be silently judging your sleep attire choices. There's often an ingrained sense of what feels right. For many, a light covering, even if it's just a length of cloth wrapped around the waist or a loose-fitting shirt, provides a psychological comfort as much as a physical one. It's a habit, a cultural imprint. Historically, what people wore to bed, or didn't, varied enormously. For a vast stretch of human history, many people simply slept nude or in their chemise or undershirt, the garment worn closest to the skin during the day. Dedicated nightgowns or nightshirts for men, often quite long and voluminous, became fairly standard in Western cultures only from around the 16th century onwards, replacing the widespread practice of just, well, not. It's a fascinating shift. Historians still argue whether the general shift towards dedicated nightwear in many societies was primarily driven by increasing affluence and the availability of more fabric, or by evolving concepts of personal hygiene and bodily privacy. It's one of those chicken or egg things, or perhaps fabric or feeling awkward things. Now, if the air carries a distinct chill, as it so often does when the sun dips below the horizon, the lack thereof option becomes decidedly less appealing unless you're particularly hardy or have an exceptionally warm sleeping companion, preferably one that doesn't snore like a freight train. This is where layers become your best friend. You might start with that basic underlayer we discussed, something soft against your skin if you have it. Then you add more, another tunic, perhaps, or a thicker overshirt. Maybe you've got leggings or some form of leg coverings. The key is to trap air. It's not so much the fabric itself that keeps you warm, but the air pockets it creates. Still air is a fantastic insulator. Think of it like a down comforter, only instead of goose feathers, you're working with whatever you've got. Each layer adds another boundary, another little pocket of air, warmed by your own body. You'll want to choose your layers wisely. If you wear something too tight, it can actually restrict blood flow and make you feel colder. Counterintuitive? I know. Loose layers are generally better, and material matters. Wool. If you can get it, and it doesn't make you itch like you're hosting a flea circus, is a champion. It stays warm even when it's a bit damp. Linen is breathable, good for a base layer, but not the warmest on its own. Cotton, so common today, is actually a bit of a liability in the cold if it gets wet, as it holds moisture and chills you to the bone. So, if your only option is that slightly damp cotton shirt, from your day's exertions, you might be in for a shivery night unless you can thoroughly dry it first. Sometimes, the most practical sleepwear isn't purpose-made at all, but rather just your driest, loosest day clothes, carefully layered. You might end up looking a bit like a very sleepy, very lumpy onion. But hey, warmth is warmth. So, how is all this body heat actually conserved? Well, your body is constantly generating heat, a byproduct of all those amazing metabolic processes keeping you alive. When you're in a cool environment, that heat naturally wants to escape from your warmer body to the cooler air around you. Clothing, especially those lovely layers we just talked about, acts as a barrier, slowing down this heat loss. The trapped air between the fibers of the fabric and between the layers of clothing themselves gets warmed up by your body. This creates a microclimate, a little envelope of warmth that surrounds you. Your skin feels this trapped warmth, not the raw chill of the outside air. If you huddle, drawing your knees to your chest, you reduce the surface area of your body exposed to the cold, further helping to conserve that precious heat. Your head is a significant source of heat loss, which is why a simple cap, or even just pulling a hood up, can make a disproportionate difference to your overall comfort. It's like putting a lid on a simmering pot. Keeps the good stuff in. It's interesting, isn't it? How much thought can go into something as simple as what you wear to bed or don't wear? There's a quirky little tidbit from medieval Europe that some people believed sleeping in clothes worn during the day could transfer all the day's accumulated worries, stresses, and maybe even a few minor evils directly into your dreams. So, they'd opt for separate night attire, or simply sleep in the buff, to ensure a fresher, failet, demon-infested start to their slumbers. Whether that worked is, of course, up for debate, but it certainly adds another layer to the practicality versus, well, spiritual hygiene. Perhaps ultimately, whatever you choose to sleep in, or not in, the goal is the same: to find that sweet spot of comfort and temperature regulation that allows your body to relax, to disengage from the demands of the day, and to sink into the restorative embrace of sleep. You want to feel secure, unconstricted, and just the right amount of cozy, so your mind can drift off without worrying if your toes are about to turn into tiny icicles, or if you're slowly poaching in your own personal sauna. So, as you settle down now, listen to your body. Is that draft hitting your back? Is that seam digging in? Make those little adjustments. Tug that blanket higher. Shed that extra layer if you're too warm, or add one if you're not. Because a good night's sleep, as we're constantly reminded, is not a luxury, especially out here. It's essential. The dancing flames, which just a short while ago were so boisterous, painting lively, leaping shadows on the rough-hewn walls of our, shall we say, cozy dwelling, are beginning to calm. You watch them, don't you, mesmerized by their retreat. This fire, this beautiful crackling heart of your temporary world, has been your steadfast companion, more reliable than some Wi-Fi connections I could mention. Its warmth is a physical presence, a comforting blanket against the chill that perpetually nibbles at the edges of your existence out here. Remember how the wind howled earlier, like a disgruntled spirit denied entry? Well, inside, close to this hearth, you've been cocooned in a bubble of relative comfort, the heat radiating outwards, pushing back the encroaching cold that seems to press in from the very stones and earth around you. It's not just about staving off hypothermia, though that's obviously a rather significant perk. It's about the feeling of safety, of a space carved out from the wild, a small pocket of defiance against the night, the light it casts, now softening, turning the familiar shapes of your shelter into softer, more mysterious forms, is the only real illumination you have, apart from the distant, indifferent stars. Now, as the evening deepens, you begin the slow, deliberate process of letting the fire die down for the night. It's not a matter of simply walking away and letting it blaze until it exhausts itself. Oh no, that would be terribly wasteful. And as we've established, resources are everything. You select a few of the best remaining logs, those that have burned down to glowing, intensely hot embers, with a sturdy branch, perhaps one flattened at the end for this very purpose. You carefully, gently nudge these radiant hearts together. Then you begin to cover them with a thick layer of ash, like tucking them into bed. This is a practice as old as hearths themselves. Banking the fire, as it was known across countless cultures, was a crucial daily ritual. This careful burial in ash starves the embers of oxygen, slowing their consumption to a crawl, ensuring that a core of heat will survive the long, cold hours until morning. It's a bit like putting your ancient smartphone on extreme battery saver mode, hoping there's enough juice to at least get the alarm to go off. There's a certain meditative quality to this task, isn't there? The gentle scrape of wood on ash, the soft hiss as an ember is covered, the gradual dimming of the light. It's the final act of the day, a signal that it's time for the world, or at least your small part of it, to rest. And as the last visible flame flickers and surrenders, transforming into a dull, pulsing glow beneath its ashen blanket, you feel it almost immediately. The cold, it doesn't burst in. Rather, it seeps. It creeps up from the floor. A subtle coolness at first, then a more insistent chill that snakes around your ankles. The warmth that had radiated from the fire, creating that lovely microclimate in your immediate vicinity, begins to dissipate with surprising speed. The air, which felt pleasantly dry and warm, now takes on a damp, heavy quality. You can almost feel the temperature dropping degree by degree, a silent, invisible invasion. Goosebumps might prickle your skin, even under those layers of furs or woven fibers we talked about. The shadows in the corners of your shelter, once held at bay by the firelight, now deepen and stretch, seeming to reclaim the space. It's a stark reminder of your vulnerability, of how thin the barrier is between comfort and the raw, unembaked, thin, untamed environment just outside. The absence of the fire's crackle makes the sounds of the night the sigh of the wind through the trees, the distant call of an unseen creature, perhaps the scuttling of some small thing nearby, all the more prominent, all the more present. That faint, internal glow from the banked embers, your original nightlight, is less a comfort now and more a countdown timer to the morning's chill. This nightly dance with the dying fire is inextricably linked with the constant, crucial task of managing your fuel resources. Every piece of wood you fed into that blaze throughout the evening was a calculated decision. Did you burn too much too soon, reveling in a glorious, but perhaps extravagant, inferno? Or were you frugal, maybe a little too frugal, enduring a less comfortable evening to ensure you have enough dry kindling and larger pieces to coax the fire back to life in the frigid dawn? Historians still argue whether the consistent ability to restart a fire from embers, rather than from scratch using laborious friction methods, was a more significant leap forward than initial fire control itself. Certainly, knowing you have those precious embers waiting makes the prospect of the cold night slightly less daunting. You'd have spent a good part of your day gathering this fuel. Remember, assessing which wood was dry enough, which types burned slow and hot, which were better for quick, bright flames. Some cultures even prized specific types of fungi, like the tinder fungus, which, when properly prepared, could hold a smoldering spark for hours, acting as a portable ember. Mismanage your woodpile, and you're in for a very uncomfortable, perhaps even dangerous, night and a truly miserable morning, trying to start a fire from nothing with numb fingers. It's a responsibility that weighs on you, a constant background hum of calculation, not unlike the low battery anxiety we feel when our modern gadgets are about to give up the ghost. It's just that here, the stakes are a tad higher than missing a few social media updates. The hearth's last glow isn't just an ending, it's a promise, a carefully managed hope for the warmth of a new day. And so, with the last of the day's tasks completed, the final prayer whispered, or perhaps just a weary sigh escaping your lips, you find yourself ready for what comes next. You've extinguished the rushlight, or maybe banked the fire carefully, leaving only the faintest orange glow painting the rough-hewn walls. The darkness that settles in around you isn't just an absence of light. It's a presence, thick and velvety, a blanket woven from the long hours stretching ahead until dawn. You pull your covers, perhaps a heavy quilt, a scratchy wool blanket, or if you're a bit more fortunate, something finer, up to your chin. The air in the room is likely cool, carrying the scent of wood smoke, old timbers, and maybe even the faint, earthy smell of the animals if they're housed nearby or, heaven forbid, sharing your living space. Now, as you nestle into your straw-filled mattress or your more comfortable feather bed, you're not anticipating an uninterrupted 8-hour journey into dreamland. That's a rather modern expectation, you see. Instead, you're preparing for what was known, quite simply, as the first sleep. This isn't just a quirky old term. It's a window into a completely different rhythm of life, a pattern called segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep if you want to use the fancy term. Imagine your night divided into 2 main acts, with a fascinating intermission in between. Right now, your focus is entirely on Act 1. This first sleep isn't a light doze, a mere cat nap. Oh no, this is a deep, profound slumber, usually lasting for about 3 to 4 hours. Your body, unburdened by the constant buzz of electric lights or the glow of a phone screen, readily surrenders to the natural cues of the environment. The sheer, overwhelming darkness of a pre-industrial night is something we can barely comprehend. Remember how we talked about the setting sun plunging your world into an almost immediate obscurity? Well, that darkness is your constant companion for many, many hours, especially during the long winter nights. It's this extended period of natural gloom, unbroken by anything brighter than the moon or stars, that perfectly facilitated this segmented sleep pattern. What else are you going to do for 12 or 14 hours? Develop a killer Sudoku habit by moonlight? Not likely. Your body instinctively knew how to parcel out the night. So, you drift off. The sounds of the night, which might have been a source of anxiety or interruption for a modern sleeper, are just part of the soundscape. The hoot of an owl, the distant bark of a dog, the creak of the house settling, the sigh of the wind. These are the lullabies of your first sleep. Your mind, free from the endless scroll and the 24/7 news cycle, can actually, well, rest. It's a dive into oblivion, a necessary recharge before the night unfolds its next chapter. It's a mainstream historical fact that this pattern of sleeping twice a night was utterly commonplace across the Western world for centuries, stretching from ancient times right up until the late 17th and 18th centuries, and even lingering into the 19th in some rural areas. Literary works, medical texts, personal diaries, and court records from figures as diverse as Chaucer, Shakespeare, and Benjamin Franklin all make casual references to this first sleep and the subsequent period of wakefulness as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Because, for them, they weren't suffering from insomnia if they woke up after a few hours. They were simply transitioning. Now, for a quirky, lesser-known tidbit about this initial plunge into slumber: people didn't generally fear this first sleep ending prematurely, or fret if they woke up before their second sleep. There wasn't the same kind of modern panic we feel, that desperate, "Oh no, I'm awake. I need to get back to sleep. Right now. Or tomorrow will be ruined." Feeling. Waking up in the middle of the deep night, after this initial period of profound rest, was entirely expected. It was a natural punctuation mark, not a full stop of horror. The idea of a single, consolidated block of sleep being the only healthy way to rest is a relatively new invention. Funny how we've managed to pathologize something our ancestors did for millennia, isn't it? Perhaps they knew a thing or two about pacing themselves through the vast stillness of the night. As you lie there, sinking deeper and deeper, your breathing evening out, your muscles relaxing completely, you are part of a tradition as old as settled human society. The very air you breathe, cool and still, seems to encourage this descent. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep pattern, particularly the depth and recuperative power attributed to the first sleep, was a purely biological response to the light-dark cycle, an inherent human rhythm simply allowed to express itself by the pre-industrial environment, or if it was more of a culturally learned and reinforced behavior, shaped by social norms and the practicalities of a world without constant illumination. Was it nature, nurture, or a perfect blend of both, creating this predictable and accepted rhythm of rest? For now, though, such debates are far from your mind. You are simply sleeping. The world outside your small haven continues its nocturnal turn. The stars, if the sky is clear, are blazing with an intensity rarely seen in our light-polluted modern skies. The quiet is profound, broken only by those natural ancient sounds. Your first sleep is a journey into the core of the night, a silent, personal passage through its darkest hours. You're not fighting the darkness. You're embracing it, using it as a cradle. There's no pressure to perform, no alarm set, just the gentle, inevitable drift into unconsciousness, a surrender to the body's ancient wisdom, preparing you for whatever the middle of the night might bring. Enjoy this peace, this unburdened rest. It's a gift of the darkness. And so, you drift, not into deeper slumber. Not yet. Instead, you surface, slowly, gently, like a diver ascending from profound depths into a strange, familiar twilight. Your eyelids flutter open, but there's no sudden rush of light, no jolt back to a bright reality. There's just less of nothing. You're awake. It's an odd sensation, this stirring in the heart of the night. You're not alarmed, not groggy in that unpleasant, modern way where the alarm clock has ripped you from a dream you desperately wanted to finish. No, this feels expected, almost scheduled, though there are no schedules here, not in the way you might think. This is the time between sleeps, the quiet pause in the deep, dark rhythm of the medieval night. You lie still for a moment, letting the awareness settle. The first thing you register is the darkness. Oh, we've talked about dark before, haven't we? That cozy, firelit dark as you settle down after your meager, but hopefully sustaining, evening meal. But this is darkness. This is the kind of profound, absolute black that swallows light whole and digests it without a trace. There's no friendly orange glow from a streetlight seeping under the door. No standby light from some infernal gadget blinking accusingly from across the room. If you hold your hand up in front of your face, well, you assume you're holding your hand up. You certainly can't see it. It's a velvety, inky, all-encompassing void, the kind that makes you wonder if your eyes are even open. You blink a few times, just to be sure. Yep, still open, still nothing. It's almost a physical presence, this darkness pressing in softly from all sides. Then comes the cold. Remember that slightly scratchy woolen blanket we talked about? The one you pulled up to your chin with such satisfaction a few hours ago. It suddenly feels inadequate. The chill isn't aggressive, not a biting wind, but a slow, seeping, insidious cold that finds every tiny gap in your coverings, every exposed inch of skin. It creeps up from the packed earth floor, even through the straw pallet beneath you. You can feel it in your bones, a deep, resonant cold that makes your breath plume invisibly in the air before you. You curl a little tighter, pulling your knees towards your chest, trying to conserve whatever meager warmth your own body has generated. Your toes are probably distant, icy rumors by now. You wiggle them. Yep, still there, still complaining. Modern folks, with their central heating and their tog-rated duvets, would probably declare this a humanitarian crisis. You just endure. It's simply the way of things. Listen. What do you hear at first? Perhaps nothing beyond the faint thrumming in your own ears. The silence is as profound as the darkness. All those daytime sounds, the distant clang of the blacksmith we passed, the chatter in the village square, even the rustle of animals in the nearby woods, all gone, utterly erased. But then, as your senses sharpen in the dark, tiny sounds emerge, the faint creak of the hut's timbers as they settle, responding to the night's chill. Is that a mouse, skittering somewhere in the thatch above? Probably. At least it's not a rat. You hope. You can hear your own breathing, a soft, rhythmic hush. If you have a companion sharing your meager bed, perhaps a spouse, a child, or even a particularly favored piglet, depending on your circumstances, you might hear their breathing too, a counterpoint to your own. It's a surprisingly intimate sound in the vast emptiness of the night. This period of wakefulness, this first sleep and second sleep, with a conscious gap in between, is entirely normal for you. It's a well-documented pattern, this segmented sleep, that folks in your time just accepted as the way nights worked. There's no tossing and turning with anxiety about not getting your solid 8 hours. No reaching for a glowing rectangle to see what time it is, and then despairing. You don't have a concept of teenage sleep hygiene to fail at. It's just time. Quiet time. So, what do you do now in this chilly, dark interlude? Well, your options are somewhat limited, aren't they? You're not exactly going to scroll through social media or catch up on your streaming queue. Some people use this time for prayer, a quiet communion in the stillness. Others reflect on their dreams from the first sleep. Dreams are often considered significant, messages or portents. So now is a good time to puzzle them out. If you're sharing your bed, you might have a quiet, whispered conversation, perhaps about the day past, or worries for the morrow, or maybe something a little more intimate. Indeed, many believed this wakeful period was an ideal time for marital relations, considered particularly fruitful. So, there's that option if you're not too cold and you can find each other in the dark without too much accidental elbowing. Sometimes, if a task was pressing or could be done by feel, it might be attended to. Perhaps mending a garment by the faint memory of where the hole was, or quietly tending to a baby. A quirky little tidbit for you. Some folks might even use this time to visit very close neighbors if the night wasn't too bitter and they knew the path by heart. Perhaps to share a few whispered words, or borrow an ember if their own fire had truly died. Though, honestly, navigating outside in this blackness is a recipe for a bruised shin, at best. Most likely, you just lie there. You think. You exist in the quiet. Historians still argue whether this interstitial period, sometimes called the dorve, was always a welcome, meditative space, or if, on particularly frigid nights like this one, it was just a bit of an endurance test before the blessed relief of second sleep. Probably a bit of both, depending on the night and your personal disposition. You shift slightly, trying to find a warmer patch on your straw mattress. A futile endeavor, really. The cold is a constant companion. You might ponder the stars, even though you can't see them through the thick roof. You know they're up there, wheeling in their silent, majestic dance. The same stars that guided travelers and marked the seasons long before you, and will long after. It's a strangely comforting thought. Your own small, chilly wakefulness, a tiny speck in the grand, indifferent sweep of the cosmos. No pressure, though. You're not expected to solve the mysteries of the universe. Just be awake for a bit. Maybe you try to recall the taste of that pottage from hours ago, or mentally rehearse a task for the coming day. It's a quiet, personal time, unburdened by the demands of daylight. Soon enough, the gentle tide of sleepiness will begin to pull at you again, drawing you back towards the warmth, or at least the oblivion, of your second sleep. But for now, you are simply here, awake in the deep, dark, cold heart of the medieval night. And so, you find yourself adrift in that strange in-between ocean of the night. The first sleep, as we talked about, has released you. But the dawn is still a distant rumor. It's not that unsettling, frantic wakefulness of a modern 3 a.m. anxiety attack. Not usually. It's quieter, more accepted. Your body, remember, is simply following a rhythm that for centuries was the human norm. The house around you breathes softly. The embers in the hearth, if you've been diligent, might still glow a faint, pulsating orange, like a sleepy dragon's eye. So, what do you do in this velvet darkness? It's not like you can just doom scroll through ye old TikTok. Well, for starters, there are the quiet chores. You slide from your straw-stuffed mattress, or perhaps your shared family bed. Careful not to disturb the others too much. The floorboards are cool beneath your bare feet, maybe a little gritty. You might take this time to do some mending. In the faint moonlight, filtering through a small, likely unglazed window, or by the light of that single, precious tallow candle you've carefully lit. You thread a needle. The fabric of a worn shirt or a child's stocking feels rough but familiar in your hands. There's a quiet satisfaction to it, this small act of repair in the heart of the night. It's oddly productive, isn't it? Like finally organizing that junk drawer, but with more medieval flair. Or perhaps you turn your attention to food preparation for the coming day. You might silently sift flour, the fine powder almost invisible in the dim light, relying more on feel. Or you could sort dried beans, listening for the tiny click-clack as they fall into separate bowls, picking out any small stones. No blenders whirring here, no microwave beeps, just the subtle sounds of your own industry. Maybe you're sharpening a knife, a slow, rhythmic shink, shink, shink against a whetstone. You have to be careful, of course. A slip in the dark could be inconvenient. Let's just say first aid back then wasn't exactly a trip to the local pharmacy for some neosporin and a brightly colored bandage. Beyond these practical tasks, this interval is often a time for contemplation or prayer. The world outside is hushed, the demands of the day temporarily suspended. You might sit by that small window, gazing out at a sky impossibly spangled with stars, far from any light pollution we know today. You reflect on the day past, the day to come, perhaps on bigger, more existential questions, if you're religiously inclined, and many people were. This is a prime opportunity for personal devotion. It's a well-documented, mainstream historical fact that prayer and religious observance were deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, often marking specific times. And this quiet, nocturnal period was no exception for personal reflection. You might murmur familiar prayers, your voice barely a whisper, feeling a connection to something larger than yourself in the stillness. It's like a forced meditation session, but with the added bonus of potentially avoiding eternal damnation. If other members of your household are also awake, and it's quite likely they are, sharing this segmented sleep pattern, this can be a time for quiet social interaction. You huddle closer to those fading embers, sharing what little warmth remains. Conversations are subdued, intimate. Perhaps you discuss family matters, share small worries, or even tell stories. Children, if awake, might listen, their eyes wide in the gloom, to tales of local folklore or family history. It's a bonding time, forged in the shared experience of the night. Imagine actual face-to-face conversation without a screen in sight. Radical, I know. Then there are the animals, if you live on a farm or keep livestock, which most people did in some capacity. Attending to them might be necessary. You pull on a rough cloak against the night chill, the air outside surprisingly crisp and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and maybe distant wood smoke. You unlatch the door, a creak echoing in the silence, and step out. The stars are even more brilliant out here. You make your way to the barn or the animal pen. A cow might be close to calving, or a sick lamb might need checking. The soft rustles and occasional sleepy snorts of the animals are a comforting sound. You might offer a bit of fodder or fresh water. Here's a neat, quirky, lesser-known tidbit. Some folklore traditions held specific beliefs about interacting with animals at night, sometimes suggesting that animals could speak or had heightened supernatural awareness during these dark hours. So you'd want to be on your best behavior. No telling the pig your deepest secrets, just in case. And what about venturing further afield, visiting neighbors? Now, this wasn't an every night occurrence, like popping over for a cup of sugar at 2 a.m. because you fancy baking insomnia cookies. The night held real dangers, both mundane and, in the popular imagination, supernatural. Roads were unlit, uneven, and potentially home to less than savory characters, or just a really inconveniently placed badger hole. However, it wasn't unheard of. If there was an emergency, a sudden illness, a fire, urgent news that couldn't wait until morning, a brave soul might venture out, perhaps with a lantern if they were well off enough to afford the oil or candles. Sometimes too, if you knew your neighbor also kept these hours, a pre-arranged quiet visit for a specific purpose, like borrowing a crucial tool or sharing a nightcap of whatever passed for a soothing beverage, might happen. But historians still argue whether fennen. These nocturnal neighborly jaunts were a relatively common aspect of social life in closely knit communities, or if they were strictly reserved for moments of genuine crisis or very particular, pre-agreed circumstances. It certainly wasn't like you'd just show up unannounced, hoping they had some leftover stew. The social etiquette of dropping in at 3 a.m. was probably even more fraught than it is today. So, you see, this dorve, this waking watch in the middle of the night, wasn't dead time. It was filled with quiet purpose, reflection, and connection. A world away from our frantic, artificially lit nights, it was a different rhythm, a different way of being human in the darkness. You might even find yourself feeling a strange sense of peace, a feeling of being in sync with a much older, deeper cycle before the demands of the day. Or indeed, the lure of that second sleep calls you back to your bed. And so, that interlude, it draws to a close. The little tasks you might have attended to, the thoughts you pondered in that liminal space between sleeps, they're now gently receding. Perhaps you were reading by the faint glow of the moon, or maybe, like many did, you simply used that time for quiet contemplation, or even a bit of hushed conversation if someone else shared your watch. Whatever mischief or pious reflection you got up to during that hour or so you just had. Its purpose is fulfilled. You feel that familiar, gentle pull. Not quite the same urgency as when you first went to bed hours ago, but a deeper, more settled invitation to return. You find your way back to your sleeping place. Maybe it's a simple straw pallet, still holding the faint indentation of your body from the first sleep. Or perhaps, if you're a bit more historically fortunate, a featherbed that sighs softly as you approach. The air in the room feels different now, doesn't it? It's colder. Perhaps the fire long since banked down to mere embers, but it's a still cold, a heavy cold, not the biting chill of a window left ajar. You lift the covers, coarse wool, maybe, or if you're picturing something a tad more luxurious, heavy linen. They feel substantial, a comforting weight. Remember how they felt when you first got in? Now, there's a sense of reunion. You slide back in, and oh, that feeling. It's a profound settling. Your limbs, which might have been a little stiff from sitting or moving about in the cool air, now begin to soften, to melt back into the support beneath you. You adjust your position, perhaps turning onto your side, pulling the blankets up around your shoulders, tucking them in just so. There's a particular kind of relief in this moment, a specific release of tension you might not have even been aware you were holding. It's like finishing a chapter in a book you're enjoying and knowing there's still more to come. But for now, you can just rest in the story. Your head sinks into the pillow. Maybe it's a simple bundle of cloth, or perhaps something more deliberately stuffed. It cradles your thoughts, which are already starting to become less distinct, more like water smoothing over pebbles. This descent into sleep, this second time around, often feels different, doesn't it? The first sleep can sometimes be a battle against the day's lingering anxieties, a fight to switch off the brain. But now, after the quiet interlude of the watch, there's an easier surrender. You've already passed through the gates of slumber once tonight. Your body knows the way. It's less of a deliberate act of trying to sleep and more of a gentle, inevitable drift. It's almost like your internal system has been reset, primed for this next phase. And, of course, this whole pattern, this first sleep, wakefulness, then second sleep, was utterly normal for centuries. Our ancestors didn't toss and turn, wondering why they were awake at 1 a.m. They'd simply get up, do a few things, and then head back for their dorvée en Buffy, their second sleep. It's fascinating how something so ingrained in human experience for so long can become almost entirely forgotten, replaced by our modern obsession with 8 solid, uninterrupted hours, an ideal that, historically speaking, is quite the newcomer. And the quiet, the quiet of this specific time, it's not just silence, it's a presence. It's the deepest, most profound part of the night. The sounds of the earlier evening, the distant dog, the settling of the house, even the chirp of crickets if the season is right, those have largely faded. This is the true dead of night, the nadir, before the birds even dream of their first pre-dawn chorus, before the very earliest riser in the village or town even thinks about stirring. It's a stillness that feels ancient, almost sacred. You might hear the faint whisper of your own breath, the soft thrum of your pulse in your ears. It's the kind of quiet that makes you wonder if your neighbors have finally taken up competitive silent meditation. One can only hope. Right. But truly, it's a silence so complete, it almost has a texture, like velvet draped over the world. Some folks in times past held particular beliefs about this second sleep. There's a lesser-known tidbit that dreams experienced during this second phase were sometimes considered more significant, perhaps more prophetic or divinely inspired, than those from the first. The idea was that the mind, having been cleansed by the initial rest and the period of quiet wakefulness, was more receptive to deeper truths. Whether that meant you'd dream of winning the village lottery, or just that you'd remember to actually bolt the chicken coop tomorrow. Who's to say it's a charming notion, though, isn't it? That this specific sleep held a special key. I suppose it's a bit more poetic than our modern tendency to just Google what our stress dreams about being unprepared for an exam might mean. Dawn is still a distant promise, a rumor on the far horizon. You're nestled in the heart of the night, a time when the world outside feels suspended, paused. There's no pressure of the approaching morning yet, no subtle shift in the quality of darkness that hints at the sun's eventual return. It's just night, pure, undiluted night. You feel wonderfully detached from the demands of the day, both the one that has passed and the one yet to come. This period of second sleep was often cherished for its peace, and the nature of this second sleep itself is something interesting to ponder. Historians still argue whether the second sleep was universally considered deeper and more restorative, or if, for some, it was a lighter, perhaps more dream-filled phase than the robust, often exhausted slumber of the first sleep. Evidence from old letters and diaries can be interpreted in various ways. Some describe waking from it feeling profoundly refreshed, while others talk of it being a gentler, softer sleep. Perhaps it varied, just as our own sleep patterns do, influenced by the day's labors, our health, even what we ate for supper, that pottage we imagined earlier. For now, though, you're not analyzing it. You're simply sinking into it. The boundaries of your body feel a little less defined. The covers are a warm, gentle pressure. Each breath out carries away a little more of your awareness, a little more of the here and now. The quiet of the deep night is your cocoon, and the world outside, with all its complexities and noises, is blessedly far away. You are drifting, effortlessly, into the embrace of that second, sweet oblivion, letting the tide of sleep pull you softly, surely, back under. There's nothing to do, nothing to be, just this slow, peaceful surrender, unearned. And so, you lie there, cocooned in the relative warmth of your shared bed, the darkness pressing in from all sides, a tangible thing. Remember how we talked about the sheer, unadulterated blackness of a medieval night? Well, now you get to listen to it. At first, it might seem like pure silence, especially if you're used to the constant hum of modern life, the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the electronic whines of devices on standby. But let your ears adjust, just as your eyes try to pierce the gloom. The silence isn't empty. It's pregnant with 1,000 tiny communications. The first thing that probably registers is the wind. It's a constant companion in these winter months, a restless spirit roaming the land. Tonight, it's not a raging tempest, not the kind that threatens to peel the thatch from your roof like an old scab. Instead, it's a low, mournful sigh that presses against the wattle-and-daub walls of your little cottage. You can hear it snuffling around the ill-fitting shutters, seeking entry. A thin, whistling draft that carries the scent of frost and damp earth. It whispers secrets through the reeds of the thatch above, a sound like dry paper being crumpled and smoothed. Crumpled and smoothed. Sometimes a stronger gust will make the whole structure creak, a gentle groan like an old man settling into his favorite chair, reminding you just how organic your shelter is. It's a bit like staying in one of those very old, very characterful country inns, where every floorboard has a story, and every gust of wind sounds vaguely like a distant relative you owe money to. Then, from further afield, beyond the immediate caress of the wind, come the sounds of the wild. If you're close to the woods, and many villages were nestled right up against them, you might hear the sharp, sudden bark of a fox, a surprisingly chilling sound that can cut right through the night's fabric. Or perhaps the melancholic hoot of an owl, a soft, repeated query drifting through the cold air. Woo, woo, as it hunts for its own midnight snack. You might even catch the faint, far-off howl of a wolf, a sound that would send a shiver down your spine that has nothing to do with the cold. It's a primal reminder that the tamed lands of your village are just an island in a much wilder sea. Thankfully, tonight, it's distant, more an idea of a threat than an actual one. There's also the rustling, harder to place. Could be deer, cautiously moving through the undergrowth, or perhaps just smaller creatures, mice and voles, going about their nocturnal business, blissfully unaware of the human dramas playing out nearby. Now, let your attention drift inwards to the sounds within your own four walls. Remember that precious fire we talked about, the one banked carefully for the night. It's not silent. It breathes, a soft, contented crackle as a piece of wood settles, a gentle hiss as a pocket of moisture escapes, a sudden, bright pop that might make you jump if you were less accustomed to it. It's a living presence in the room, a small warm heart beating against the cold. And you're not alone in here. Are you, if you're lucky, or perhaps just typical for the period? You might have some animals sharing your living space, or at least in an attached byre for warmth and security. The family dog, curled up on a rag pile near the hearth, might let out a soft whine in its sleep, its paws twitching as it chases dream rabbits. You might hear the contented, rumbling purr of a cat, a tiny motor of warmth, if it's deigned to bless you with its presence. If there are chickens tucked away in a corner, you might hear a soft, sleepy cluck, or the rustle of feathers. A cow in an adjoining space might shift its weight with a heavy sigh and a rustle of straw. Or the sheep might let out a quiet, questioning It's like your own medieval, organic, slightly smellier white noise machine. Some households, and this is a quirky little fact, even kept their pigs very close by, sometimes even indoors during the harshest weather. So, yes, that gentle snuffling and an occasional grunt. Totally normal. Just try not to think about it too much when you're eating your breakfast bacon. Then there are the human sounds. Oh, the symphony of human sounds in a shared sleeping space. Snoring. Of course. That's a timeless classic. Your father, perhaps, produces a deep, sonorous rumble that seems to vibrate through the very straw beneath you. Your younger sibling might offer a higher-pitched, wheezing counterpoint. It's the original family playlist, just less curated and occasionally accompanied by the faint scent of stale ale. And the rustling. Everyone is sleeping on straw-filled pallets or mattresses. Remember, not exactly memory foam. Every turn, every shift in position creates a dry, whispering rustle. Someone coughs, a dry, chesty sound common in the damp winter air. A sniffle. Someone else mutters in their sleep, a string of nonsense words, or maybe a plea to a dream figure. If there's a baby in the house, a fretful cry might briefly pierce the night, followed by the soft, shushing sounds of a mother or older sibling trying to lull it back to sleep. You might even hear the soft padding of bare feet on the packed earth floor as someone gets up, perhaps to add a small log to the dying embers of the fire, or to use that chamber pot we discussed, a soft clink if they're not careful. Finally, strain your ears for the sounds of the wider community, faint and filtered by distance, and the night itself. The most regular and defining sound would be the church bells. It's a well-known historical fact that church bells were the primary regulators of time for medieval communities, marking not just the hours for prayer, but the rhythm of the entire day and night. Even now, in the deepest part of the night, you might hear the distant, solemn toll marking one of the nocturnal canonical hours, perhaps Compline having rung earlier and the pre-dawn matins and lauds still some hours away. It's a sound that anchors you, a reminder of the spiritual framework that underpins your world. Occasionally, a dog might bark in a distant cottage, a sharp, lonely sound answered by silence, or perhaps another, even further off. Very rarely. You might hear a shout, though what that signifies is anyone's guess. A late-night reveler stumbling home, a minor domestic dispute, or perhaps the night watch. Speaking of the watch, in larger villages or towns, you might hear their periodic calls. All's well and the hour is late, or something similar. Historians still argue whether the night watch's calls were more for genuine reassurance to the sleeping populace or an actual, effective deterrent to any lurking ne'er-do-wells. Perhaps a bit of both. It's unlikely you'd hear sounds of industry at this hour. Not in deep winter. The forge is cold, the mill wheel still. The world, for the most part, is holding its breath, waiting for the dawn. All these sounds, the wind, the animals outside and in, the soft snores and rustles of your family, the distant echoes of the community, they weave together. It's a complex tapestry, this auditory environment, so different from our modern world, yet so full of its own subtle life. It's the soundtrack to your medieval winter night, a lullaby of the old world, a world that's both incredibly distant and, in these quiet, shared human moments, surprisingly close. And so, as the sun becomes a rather shy visitor, pulling its golden blanket away earlier and earlier each day, you find the world outside your small window shrinking. Those long, deep sleeps we talked about. Remember that segmented slumber, punctuated by quiet wakefulness. Well, that was just the overture. The main symphony of winter is a much slower, more deliberate composition, and its dominant theme is a profound shift in the very rhythm of life, dictated by the overwhelming presence of the night. It's not just that you're sleeping, more or differently. It's that the entire tempo of your existence downshifts, like a car easing into first gear for a long slow crawl. The long winter nights and drastically shortened days don't just invite you to bed. They gently, persistently, discourage almost everything else. The vibrant energy of summer, that almost manic need to be outside, to till, to harvest, to build. It all just seeps away with the light. You feel it in your bones. This call to conserve, to draw inwards, your activity levels, by necessity and by nature, plummet. Think about it. The fields are frozen or blanketed in snow. The forests are stark, offering little beyond firewood, and even that's a more treacherous undertaking in the biting cold and fading light. Journeys are perilous. Why risk life and limb on an icy track in the near darkness unless it's absolutely, undeniably critical? So, you don't. The world, which in summer felt expansive and full of possibility, now constricts to the immediate vicinity of your home, your village. Your daily steps, if you had a medieval Fitbit, would probably be embarrassingly low by modern standards. Though, to be fair, getting your steps in probably wasn't high on the agenda when not freezing to death, chomot, was a more pressing concern. This enforced stillness, this retreat from the wide world, naturally funnels all human endeavor indoors. The focus shifts, almost entirely, to tasks that can be performed by the hearth's glow. This isn't idle time, not in the way we might think of binge-watching a series for 8 hours straight. Though, let's be honest, staring into a fire for hours on end probably had a similar hypnotic quality. No, these are the months for mending. The tools that were worked hard during the planting and harvest seasons now need attention. Wooden handles are smoothed and refixed, blades sharpened, leather straps repaired, clothing, worn thin from constant use, is patched and stitched. every scrap of fabric precious. Remember that tunic we imagined you wearing? It's probably sporting a few more artful patches by midwinter. It's a time for crafts that require patience and meticulous attention. You might be weaving baskets, carving small wooden figures, or spinning wool into yarn. The rhythmic clack of a small loom, the scrape of a knife on wood, the soft whir of a spindle. These become the soundscape of your winter days, punctuated by the crackle of the fire and the sigh of the wind outside. It's almost cozy in a deeply anachronistic sort of way, a kind of forced mindfulness, centuries before anyone coined the term. And of course, with so much time spent together in close quarters, storytelling flourishes. This is when the old tales are retold, the myths and legends passed down, family histories recounted. It's entertainment, certainly, but it's also education, cultural transmission, and a way to bind the community together, a shared warmth against the encroaching dark. Imagine the flickering firelight casting long, dancing shadows on the walls as an elder's voice weaves a story of heroes, or tricksters, or the spirits of the woods. Pretty compelling stuff when your other entertainment option is, well, more whittling. But let's not romanticize it entirely. This prolonged period of dim light and restricted activity has a more insidious side, something we now recognize with a clinical term, but which our ancestors would have experienced just as profoundly, even if they named it differently. The long, dark months often brought with them what you might call a winter melancholy, a pervasive low energy, a kind of spiritual hibernation that wasn't always restful. We talk about seasonal affective disorder today, and it's no great leap to imagine that the relentless gloom, the sheer lack of sunlight, had a similar impact on people's moods and vitality back then. You might find yourself feeling heavy, not just from the extra layers of wool, but in your spirit. Motivation wanes. The days can feel monotonous, a gray blur punctuated by the meager light of midday. There's a certain listlessness that can settle in, a quiet desperation for the return of the sun, for the renewal of spring. They wouldn't have said, "I think I've got a touch of sad." They might have spoken of melancholia, a much older term, or perhaps attributed it to an imbalance of the humors, that mainstream historical fact of medical understanding, where the body's fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, were thought to dictate health and temperament. Too much black bile, associated with earth and autumn-harsh winter, was believed to cause melancholy. So, while the community gathered, and stories were told, and essential tasks were done, there was also this underlying current of waiting. Waiting for the light, waiting for warmth, waiting for the world to open up again. Historians still argue whether this enforced downtime fostered a unique kind of contemplative creativity, or if it was simply a period of grim endurance for many. Perhaps it was a bit of both. It's interesting to consider how they coped without our modern understanding of mental health or light therapy boxes. Community was key. Of course, those shared activities, the storytelling, the simple presence of others, would have been a vital buffer. And there were midwinter festivals, little sparks of light and revelry deliberately placed in the darkest part of the year, like a collective effort to push back against the gloom. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that in some northern cultures, there were specific rituals and games designed solely to awaken the sun or to hurry along the spring, a kind of sympathetic magic born from that deep yearning for more light. Desperate times, desperate, or perhaps just very hopeful in measures. This wasn't just about feeling a bit blue because it was dark early. This low energy, this winter torpor, influenced everything. It meant that even the indoor tasks were likely done at a slower pace. There wasn't the same frantic urgency of the harvest. The rhythm was adagio, not allegro. It was a time of conserving not just physical resources like food and firewood, but also, in a way, conserving human energy. You expended what was necessary, and no more, because spring, with all its demanding work, was still months away, and you'd need your strength then. The winter's sleep cycle, therefore, wasn't just about nighttime. It was a deep, pervasive quietude that settled over the land and its people. A long, slow breath held until the world decided to wake up again. And you, nestled by your fire, you breathe with it, feeling the slow, sleepy pulse of a world bathed in winter's long shadow. Your eyelids might even feel a little heavy now, just thinking about all that. Quiet, almost as if you're syncing up with that ancient rhythm yourself. And as that shared warmth from the fire, the one we imagined earlier keeping the worst of the chill from your small hut, begins to wane, your body starts to register other sensations. The day's labor, even in winter's slower rhythm, has left you weary. But now, as you try to settle onto your straw pallet, it's not just tired muscles demanding attention. It's your stomach, and it has a few things to say about dinner. You see, your winter diet is a masterclass in preservation, a testament to making things last, but not necessarily a gourmet experience designed for gentle digestion, or frankly, a peaceful night's sleep. Think about what you've likely eaten. The cornerstone, as always, is bread, not the fluffy, light sourdough you might picture, but a heavy, dense loaf, probably dark rye or barley, perhaps with peas or beans ground into the flour to stretch it further. It's substantial. It fills the belly, but it sits there like a stone, a slow, arduous task for your medieval digestive system, which, let's be honest, doesn't have the benefit of modern antacids. You can almost feel that dense lump in your gut, a stubborn reminder of your evening meal, making it hard to find a comfortable position. Then there's the protein, if you're fortunate. This isn't a lean, grilled chicken breast. We're talking salted meat, most commonly pork, preserved from the autumn slaughter. It's been cured in a brine so potent, it could probably preserve a small novel. The flavor is intense, overwhelmingly salty, and while it provides much-needed sustenance, that saltiness lingers, parching your throat. You take a sip of weak, slightly sour ale, or perhaps water of questionable clarity, but it barely touches the sides. This constant, nagging thirst from the salt is a common companion through the night, sometimes waking you more effectively than any rooster. Remember that chamber pot we mentioned? You'll be well acquainted with it, thanks to the relentless cycle of salt-induced thirst and a bladder working overtime. It's hardly conducive to unbroken slumber. Sometimes it might be salted fish, equally aggressive on the palate, and just as likely to leave you gasping for something to drink. The sheer effort your body expends trying to process this leathery, sodium-rich fare contributes to a general feeling of, well, internal struggle. And let's not forget the legumes. Dried peas, beans, lentils. These are your winter workhorses. Rehydrated and simmered into a thick pottage, often with a few root vegetables like turnips or carrots if you're lucky. They're filling and offer valuable nutrients, but as your modern sensibilities might whisper with a knowing wink, they also come with certain musical side effects. In your small, shared sleeping space with minimal ventilation, this can lead to an atmosphere that's less than serene. It's a bit like a medieval hotbox, but instead of incense, it's the rich, earthy aroma of digestive enthusiasm. One can only imagine the silent, or not so silent, battles waged in the dark. It's a comical thought from our 21st century remove. But for you, lying there, it's just another layer of discomfort, another reason sleep remains elusive. The real ghost at this preserved feast, however, is what's missing fresh produce. Those crisp apples, juicy berries, and leafy greens of summer and autumn are distant memories. Without them, your intake of essential vitamins, particularly vitamin C, plummets, while outright scurvy, the kind that plagued sailors on long voyages, was a known scourge. Milder deficiencies were certainly common, leading to lowered immunity, slower healing, and a general lack of vitality. This lack of fresh, fibrous food also does your digestion no favors, contributing to a sluggish system and a feeling of heaviness. Historians still argue whether the characteristic winter lethargy of medieval peasants was more due to the oppressive cold and dim light, or the sheer nutritional monotony and deficiencies of their diet. It's likely a charming combination of all those factors. So, you lie there. Your stomach might be gurgling its discontent, a symphony of rumbles and groans. Perhaps there's a burning sensation creeping up your chest, what we'd call heartburn, a fiery protest from an overtaxed esophagus dealing with heavy, sometimes fatty, and always salty food. It's a far cry from the light, easily digestible meal you might choose before bed in your modern life. Your energy levels throughout the day, fueled by these starchy, preserved staples, are likely a slow burn rather than a vibrant spark. You might feel full after a meal, but it's a heavy, dense fullness that can quickly morph into sluggishness, not the sustained, clean energy that comes from a more balanced intake. There's none of that zesty feeling you get from, say, a fresh salad or a piece of fruit. It's more akin to the post-holiday dinner slump, but on a daily basis. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that some peasants believed that eating too much dried food, especially beans, without enough liquid could cause wind colic, so severe it could mimic more serious ailments, leading to all sorts of folk remedies involving herbal concoctions that probably tasted worse than the initial problem. Imagine trying to explain to your hut mates that your groans are just a touch of the bean wind, not the plague. Good times. The cumulative effect on your physical comfort is significant. You might feel bloated. Your joints might ache a little more from the general inflammation that a poor diet can encourage. And your overall sense of well-being is subtly, persistently undermined. Sleep, when it finally comes, might be fitful, punctuated by digestive discomfort, thirst, or the need to relieve yourself. It's not the deep, restorative rest your body craves after a day of physical toil, even the reduced toil of winter. It's more like a temporary ceasefire in the ongoing battle between your body and your winter rations. You shift on the rustling straw, trying to find an angle where your stomach doesn't feel quite so present. That faint light from the dying embers, which seemed so cozy earlier, now just illuminates the rough textures of your reality. A reality where even the simple act of digesting dinner is a nightly challenge to your rest. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow's menu will likely be strikingly similar. A culinary Groundhog Day, if you will, but with more salt. And as the last embers of that meager fire we talked about earlier begin to fade, a different kind of chill starts to creep in. It's not just the dropping temperature of the room. No, this is a cold that settles deep within your bones, a weariness so profound it feels like an unwelcome, heavy blanket. You've hauled water, perhaps, or spent 10 hours bent over in a field, your muscles screaming a protest that's become as familiar as your own name. Remember that relentless rhythm of the harvest, or the backbreaking effort of shifting stones for some new, grand building you'll likely never enjoy. Your body certainly remembers. You drag yourself towards that. Well, let's generously call it a bed. Your shoulders burn with a dull, throbbing ache, the kind that makes you wince with every movement. Your lower back feels like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap. It's been complaining since mid-morning, a persistent grumble that has now escalated to a full-blown argument. You can almost feel each vertebra grinding against the next. Modern life has us complaining about our ergonomic chairs, doesn't it? Imagine this, but every single day, with no prospect of a decent massage or even a hot bath to look forward to. The best you can hope for is that tomorrow's ache might be in a slightly different place. And it's not just the sheer physical exertion. That diet we've discussed, the one heavy on starches and, shall we say, light on variety. Think endless bowls of that hearty, if monotonous pottage, isn't exactly fueling a pain-free existence. Your stomach might be gurgling unhappily. A constant, low-level discomfort from food that's difficult to digest, or simply not providing the right nutrients. You might feel a pervasive weakness, a lack of true energy that makes the aches feel even heavier. That persistent headache could be dehydration, could be hunger, could be the sheer stress of it all. It's a fun guessing game with no prizes. Rickets, caused by a lack of vitamin D, was tragically common, especially in rapidly industrializing cities with tall buildings blocking sunlight, leading to softened, aching bones in children and adults alike. So, that deep ache in your limbs might be more than just fatigue. It could be your very skeleton complaining about the lack of sunshine and decent food. Then there's the matter of hygiene, or rather, the conspicuous lack thereof. Remember the communal washing facilities, if any, or the infrequent changes of clothes your skin feels gritty. There's a persistent itch somewhere on your back you just can't quite reach, and you suspect it's more than just dry skin. Little sores or rashes might be common companions, flaring up with the sweat of the day and the irritation of rough-spun, unwashed linen. This isn't the kind of glowing from a good workout feeling. It's the sticky, uncomfortable residue of a day lived without modern plumbing. The idea of slipping into clean sheets is a fantasy beyond imagining. Instead, you're about to lie down with all the grime of the day, inviting it to join the party. Your aching muscles are already throwing, so you finally lower yourself onto the bed. And lower is the operative word, because collapsing might just shatter something. That straw-filled mattress, or perhaps just a pile of rags on the floor if you're less fortunate, offers zero support. It's lumpy, isn't it? One particularly stubborn lump seems to align perfectly with that knot in your shoulder blade, pressing into it with a vengeance. The straw, if it's old, might be damp and carry a faint, musty odor. Maybe even the telltale signs of little critters who also call this place home. You wouldn't be surprised if your bed had more inhabitants than your entire village. It's less a bed and more a collection of uncomfortable textures. The cold is a constant enemy here, even if you have a woolen blanket. It's likely thin and coarse, doing little to ward off the chill that seeps up from the floorboards or through the poorly insulated walls. This cold doesn't just make you shiver, it makes every ache more acute, every stiff joint more painful. Your fingers and toes might be numb, tingling painfully as you try to tuck them in. Chilblains are a common torment, those itchy, swollen patches on your extremities. A delightful souvenir of prolonged exposure to cold and damp. Lovely. You try to find a comfortable position, but it's a futile exercise. Lie on your back, and the lumps dig in. Lie on your side, and your hip screams in protest, while your shoulder feels like it's being crushed. Your knees knock together, bone on bone. Sleep, when it eventually comes, is likely to be shallow and fitful, punctuated by the need to shift position, to try and alleviate one pressure point only to create another. You might find yourself curling up tightly, trying to conserve warmth, which only makes your already strained muscles cramp further. Some folks swore by rubbing goose grease on their aching joints, which, while perhaps providing a moment of slippery distraction, probably did more to attract vermin to your already questionable mattress than cure anything. It's the medieval equivalent of trying to fix your Wi-Fi by unplugging the toaster. Common ailments like rheumatism, what we might now call arthritis or chronic joint pain, are just part of the background noise of life for many. There are no anti-inflammatory drugs, no physiotherapy, just a grim acceptance. Historians still argue whether the constant, low-level pain experienced by many was simply accepted as the human condition back then, or if there were more nuanced individual experiences of suffering that just weren't widely recorded. It's hard to imagine a world where popping a couple of ibuprofen isn't an option. You can hear others in the room if you're not sleeping alone, which, as we've established, is highly likely. Their coughs, their snores, their own restless turnings are a symphony of shared discomfort. There's no escaping it. This bed, this room, it's not a sanctuary for rest and recovery. It's more like a cold, lumpy purgatory you endure between one exhausting day and the next. You close your eyes, not with the gentle sigh of contentment, but with a weary resignation, hoping that unconsciousness will at least offer a temporary reprieve from the relentless complaints of your own body. Sweet dreams are, shall we say, not on the menu tonight, or any night, really. The last embers in your hearth, remember those we talked about, are beginning to fade, and the world outside your wattle-and-daub walls transforms. It's no longer just dark, it's alive. The night in the medieval world isn't just an absence of light, like when your Wi-Fi router blinks off at 3 a.m. and you're plunged into a terrifying, dataless void. Oh no, this darkness is teeming, a thick, almost tangible presence, and it's whispering your name. Or maybe that's just the wind. You hope it's just the wind. You pull your thin woolen blanket, the one that still smells faintly of sheep and, if you're honest, a bit of last week's stew, a little tighter around your shoulders. The very air seems to press in on you, carrying with it a whole host of anxieties that daylight so kindly keeps at bay. Every creak of the house, every rustle in the thatch overhead isn't just an old building settling or a mouse looking for a forgotten crumb. It's a potential sign, a warning, because the night, my friend, is when they come out to play. And who are they? Well, take your pick. The medieval imagination, fueled by flickering candlelight. And, let's be fair, probably a fair amount of indigestion from that slightly off pottage. Conjured a veritable legion of nocturnal nasties, you've got your classic demons, of course, always eager to tempt a pious soul or, failing that, just trip you on your way to the chamber pot. These weren't necessarily the horned, red-skinned devils of later popular culture, but more insidious, shapeless terrors, beings of pure malice that could slip through keyholes or whisper doubts into your sleeping mind. Think of them as the original internet trolls, but with actual supernatural power. Then there are the spirits, the restless dead, those who died unshriven, or with unfinished business, or perhaps just because they were particularly grumpy in life and saw no reason to change their habits in death. They might be heard wailing in the churchyard, or seen as fleeting, pale shapes drifting across the moors. Sometimes they're just looking for a bit of company, which is considerably less charming when they're trying to drag you into a bog. It's a mainstream historical fact that belief in ghosts and hauntings was incredibly widespread, influencing daily life and even legal proceedings sometimes. Someone claims their neighbor's ghost told them where the stolen chickens were. Well, that's evidence of a sort. And let's not forget the more, shall we say, niche entities. Fairies, for instance, not the sparkly. Tinkerbell types, medieval fairies, or the good folk as you'd call them because calling them anything else was just asking for trouble. Like complaining about the service at a restaurant where the chef is also your landlord could be capricious and dangerous. They might lead travelers astray with enchanting lights, swap your healthy baby for a sickly changeling, or just curdle your milk out of spite. They're the ultimate chaotic neutral, if you're into D&D alignments. but with a serious penchant for mischief that could have very real consequences for you. The darkness itself feels like a predator, out there, beyond the flimsy protection of your door, which, remember, might just be a heavy curtain or a poorly fitting wooden plank, are the very real dangers of wolves, or bandits, or simply tripping over a rock and breaking your ankle with no one around to help until morning. If ever, that vulnerability is palpable. You're isolated. The communal hustle and bustle of the day, that reassuring presence of other people, has vanished. It's just you, the shadows, and whatever your anxious mind can cook up. And your mind, let me tell you, is a Michelin-starred chef when it comes to cooking up fears. You might hear a dog barking frantically in the distance. Is it chasing a fox, or is it warning of something unseen? Something its keener senses can detect, but yours cannot. The hoot of an owl normally, a rather comforting, rustic sound, suddenly becomes an omen. Certain birds crying at night were considered harbingers of death. It's like getting a spam call that actually does have important and terrifying information. Historians still argue whether the elaborate demonologies and spirit hierarchies were a genuine, terrifying reality for everyone, or if, for many, it was a more folkloric, almost allegorical way of understanding the unexplainable and the anxieties of life. Perhaps it was a bit of both, a sliding scale of belief from abject terror to a kind of respectful, cautious acknowledgement. So, what do? You don't just lie there and passively await your doom, or worse, a visit from your deceased great Aunt Agnes, who always criticized your weaving. No, you have your defenses. Religion, as we've touched upon before, is your primary shield. You say your prayers, fervently, the Pater Noster, the Ave Maria. These are not just words, they are spiritual armor. You might make the sign of the cross repeatedly. It's the medieval equivalent of hitting refresh on your antivirus software, hoping it catches the latest malware. Specific saints were invoked for protection against nighttime terrors. Saint Christopher, for example, a protector of travelers, might be called upon if you absolutely had to venture out. Saint Michael the Archangel, the celestial warrior, was a good bet against demonic forces. You might have a small, crudely carved wooden cross tucked under your pillow, or a sprig of blessed herbs hung over the doorway. Remember those herbal remedies we discussed? Some herbs weren't just for physical ailments, but for spiritual ones too. Believed to repel evil spirits, Angelica, for instance, was sometimes called the root of the Holy Ghost. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is the belief in the power of certain sounds or actions to ward off evil. Loud noises, like banging pots and pans, though your neighbors might not appreciate a midnight symphony, were thought to scare away spirits. Even something as simple as sleeping with a piece of iron, like a knife under your bed, was considered a deterrent for fairies and other malevolent entities, as iron was believed to be anathema to them. It's like leaving out a little welcome mat that says, "Fairies, please use other entrance, preferably one leading to a different village entirely." And, of course, there's the comforting presence of the church bell. The Compline bell, rung in the evening, marked the end of the day and was a signal for prayer, a communal blanket of sound offering reassurance. Its tolling was a reminder that even in the deepest dark, divine protection was watching over the faithful. It was a sonic boundary, a declaration that this space, this community was under God's care. But even with all these precautions, the fear is a constant companion. You listen to the sounds of your family sleeping nearby, the soft snores, the occasional sleepy mumble. Their presence is a comfort, a small island of warmth in the vast, cold ocean of the night. You close your eyes, perhaps murmuring one last prayer, and try to push away the images of what might be lurking just beyond your perception in those deep shadows where the candlelight, like the weak beam from an old cell phone, just can't quite reach. The night is long, and dawn feels a lifetime away. You just have to make it through, one trembling breath at a time, hoping that the scariest thing you encounter is just a particularly vivid dream about failing to properly churn butter. Though, to be fair, in this economy, that is pretty terrifying. It begins subtly, a slight dilution of the profound, inky blackness that has held dominion for so many hours. You're not quite awake, still tethered to the frayed edges of a dream. Something about trying to explain Wi-Fi to a particularly skeptical, woolly mammoth. Remember that fleeting absurdity. But a new sensation is seeping through the layers of your makeshift bedding. It's a coolness, yes, the familiar chill of pre-dawn, but there's something else. A whisper of change in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible lightening at the very edge of your awareness. Your internal alarm clock, a charming combination of a frozen bladder, and the dawning realization you didn't quite finish fashioning that saber-toothed tiger repellent yesterday, begins its gentle, insistent work. You stir, a slow, reluctant unfurling of limbs that feel stiff as ancient logs. The transition from the soft oblivion of sleep to the sharp, cold reality of the day is always a bit of a shock, like diving into an icy lake, though perhaps, just perhaps, the water isn't quite as frigid as it was a few weeks ago. The air you draw into your lungs is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth, distant pine, and the faintest, almost ghostly aroma of last night's fire, that faithful companion we talked about. Your eyes crack open, gritty and unwilling. The world outside your eyelids is a study in muted grays and deep blues. The l'heure bleue, as the French would later call it, that magical transient moment between night and day. There's a profound stillness, broken only by the occasional sigh of the wind through the sparse, waking trees, or maybe the distant, hopeful chirrup of an early bird. You know, ornithologists have found that birdsong in the dawn chorus is often more complex and varied than songs at other times of day. It's like they're showing off their best material for the sunrise premiere, a sort of avian talent show before the day's grind. The morning routine, such as it is, begins. You push aside the heavy furs, the ones you meticulously patched after that little incident with the over-enthusiastic rodent, and the cold immediately nips at your exposed skin. A brisk reminder that comfort is a luxury, not a given. A deep stretch, punctuated by a series of cracks and pops from joints that have seen better millennia. You run a tongue over your teeth. Yep, still there, and probably still tasting faintly of last night's slightly too charred mystery root. Eau de caveman chic. A quick scan of your immediate surroundings. No unexpected guests. Good. The embers of the fire are glowing faintly, a tiny orange heart in the gray expanse. Your first task, as always, is to coax them back to life. You add small, dry twigs, blowing gently, patiently, until a fragile flame catches, then another. The warmth begins to radiate outwards, a small circle of defiance against the lingering chill. It's a ritual as old as, well, fire. Probably, as you tend to the nascent flames, you notice it more clearly now. The light, it's definitely stronger, arriving earlier than it did during those crushingly short days of deep winter. Remember those when darkness seemed to pounce around mid-afternoon and swallow everything whole? This is different. The sun, that celestial diva, finally decides to make a grander entrance, no longer content with its brief winter cameos, where it basically just waved from the horizon and ducked back out, muttering about the cold. There's a tangible easing, a subtle shift in the balance of power between darkness and light. It's not just the quantity of light, but the quality too. It feels less watery, more robust. The Romans, for example, divided daylight into 12b. horror. And these hours would stretch languidly in summer and shrink, shivering in winter. So, this growing light actually meant your working hours were getting longer. But somehow, it felt like a fair trade for the promise of warmth. A profound sense of relief, delicate yet persistent, unfurls within you. Much like the ferns we saw pushing through the thawing earth, winter is finally, grudgingly, starting to release its iron grip. The days are undeniably lengthening, each one a tiny victory, a small step further from the brutal heart of the frozen season. This isn't just an abstract observation. You feel it in your bones, in the slightly less agonizing chill of the morning, in the way the shadows recede a little sooner, a little more generously each day. It's a feeling of hope, not for an easy life, because when was it ever easy, but for a less hard and one. The promise of spring, with its new growth, its easier foraging, its diminished threat of freezing to death in your sleep, is no longer a distant dream, but a tangible possibility inching closer with every sunrise. Anthropologists and historians still argue whether the shift from nomadic life to settled agriculture, often tied to these very seasonal changes you're now appreciating, was truly a step forward in terms of daily comfort and freedom, or if it just swapped one set of anxieties for another, albeit with slightly better food security. Sometimes, but right now, watching that pale light strengthen, feeling the subtle shift in the world's breath, you're not thinking about academic debates. You're just feeling a quiet, tired sort of gladness. The dawn isn't just breaking over the landscape. It feels like it's breaking within you too. A slow thaw after a long, hard freeze. The journey isn't over, not by a long shot, but the path ahead looks a little brighter, a little less daunting, under the gentle insistence of the returning sun. And as the light continues to pour into this ancient world, slowly, softly, you feel the weariness of the long night, and indeed, the long journey, begin to settle in a different way. It's not the sharp, anxious exhaustion of before, but a deeper, more yielding tiredness. The kind that comes after a burden has been perceptibly lightened. The air, still cool, now carries the faintest promise of warmth to come. A gentle caress rather than a biting wind. You watch the colors of the dawn paint themselves across the vast canvas of the sky, from the softest lavenders and peaches to a slowly emerging, hopeful gold. The sounds around you remain hushed, as if the world itself is reluctant to fully awaken. Preferring to linger in this tranquil interlude, allow your own breathing to deepen, to slow, matching the unhurried rhythm of this new day. Let the images fade gently, like mist burning off in the morning sun, leaving behind just a sense of quiet peace, a soft stillness in your mind. The story continues, always. But for now, rest, just rest. Whispered, shh. Good night.